China today is a spectacular vision of modernity, a place of dynamism and opportunity. Every visitor, especially if you've been coming since the 1980s as I have, is astonished by the scale of its growth and the sheer speed of change. It was only in the mid-20th century that China went through its own industrial revolution, struggling to catch up with the West. But in the last few decades, a giant burst of growth has taken it to a leading role in the world.
Just 40 years ago, China had a new leader, a 5-foot-tall, chain-smoking veteran of the Long March with a reputation for pragmatism over ideology, Deng Xiaoping. Under Deng, China renounced class struggle and embraced the market. It saw the biggest lifting of people out of poverty that has ever taken place in human history. China became a global economic force, predicted to become the world's biggest economy in a couple of decades. But what actually happened 40 years ago? And how did China do it?
"40 years ago, China was still an agricultural country, as it had been throughout its history. 80% of the people still worked the land, and most were poor. In 1976, after the death of Chairman Mao, Deng Xiaoping returned from the countryside, where he'd been sent into exile to do manual labor. An elder statesman now, he'd always been a stalwart defender of the Communist Party. But in exile, he'd seen the system had failed to improve the lives of the mass of the people.
老百姓的生活很苦的。我从出生到20岁，不管是冬天夏天，都没有穿过鞋。那个老百姓啊，有辆自行车啊，就感到很富有的啦。
In Deng's view, China's deep-rooted social and economic problems were the product of its history.
He has a very strong sense of history. You know, he said that China was a leading nation over 1,000 years at least, actually up to the Ming Dynasty, to Zheng He. Then China began to close down. Then China began to decline.
Keen to learn from the outside world, Deng sent missions to Asia and Europe, the key one led by Gu Mu.
古牧是中国国务院的副总理。1978年的5月初到6月初，他率领了一个30人的代表团，到西欧5个国家访问，包括法国、联邦德国、瑞士、比利时和丹麦。他回国以后，向中央政治局提交了一份书面报告。第一，他认识到欧洲国家的经济、科技发展水平很高，而中国远远地落后了。古牧还汇报了一个重要的情况，就是这5个国家领导人都希望同中国建立密切的经济联系。
And they were prepared to help China also, is that right? Yeah.
因为他们意识到中国是巨大的市场，帮助中国发展的同时，他们自己也能得到发展的机会。
Deng swiftly followed by going abroad himself to Singapore and Japan to see what China's future could look like.
Deng was one of the few communist leaders in China who was exposed to the outside world. He spent almost 6 years in France as a part work, part study student. So this kind of international outlook helped him.
He wanted to see the latest science and technology, but he also wanted to know about the lives of the ordinary people.
He asked specifically CCTV, the Central Television crew, to film people's life He said, please focus on how ordinary people in Japan lived, in Singapore lived. It's an eye-opening for Chinese at that time. You know, when the Chinese saw through the television, Japanese workers have refrigerators at home, you know. It's awakening, it's a shock.
Here in the village of Shaogang, in November 1978, something happened that changed the course of Chinese history. Desperate local farmers broke with the commune system of collective farming. They just wanted to be free to live their own lives, earn a fair wage for a fair day's work, even make a bit of money. And one night in this house, they secretly made a deal to end the collective agricultural system and go back to family farms. It was against the law, but it was for life, for the people, and for the future.
40年前，在小岗村没有一块砖，没一片瓦，家家住的都是破茅草房子，就是泥巴垒的墙，上面盖的草。这证明过去没有钱呐，穷啊。现在老百姓到处讨荒要饭。
我那时候4个孩子都出世了，最小的都出世了。那个粮食呢，肯定是不够吃，这个生活困难，所以我们才按那个手艺来解决温饱啊。
What were the words that you put on the document? What was the agreement you made together?
我们签那个协议啊，我们上面写的，这个我们分田到户，每户户主签字盖章。如果说能干，每户要完成国家的，过去叫公粮，不向国家伸手要粮要钱。如果说干不成，干不杀头，小孩养活到18岁。我们的文书就这样写的。
And were you scared that the government might find out? Was it dangerous to do that?
所以说呢，我们当时的心情啊是特别的沉重。如果说不这样干，我们就被饿死；如果这样干，我们要担风险。最后我们就选择了这条路。我们宁愿去坐牢去杀头，我们还要把土地分到各家各户。
So the ordinary people of China were already seeking a new road. And in an extraordinary piece of synchronicity, at that very moment in November 1978, a conference about work and the conditions of agriculture began in Beijing. Sensing the mood in the country, Deng decided to attend and to make an important speech.
The big grey building on the corner is the Jinxi Hotel. It's quite difficult to find. There's no sign saying it's a hotel, and not everybody can book in there, especially if you're a foreigner. Although if you look it up on TripAdvisor, it says that the decor is lovely and the staff are extremely good looking and very well trained. But it's owned by the People's Liberation Army, and many important meetings of the Communist Party have taken place there over the last few decades, showing the path of China's future. But none of them so important as the meeting in December 1978.
"200 delegates had come from all over China. They met here in this room to discuss work and the commune system of agriculture. Still maneuvering for power against the hardliners, Deng prepared a short keynote speech that crystallized all he'd thought about in his years in the wilderness. The key, Deng said, was to end argument based on ideology. From now on, we must seek truth from facts. We have had grave setbacks, he admitted. The wonderful Chinese people have been very patient, for we have let the people down. From now on, he said, we must embrace science and technology, open up the market, and use the economy to lift people out of poverty. Some of his audience were shocked, but most were excited. He concluded, the time has come to liberate our minds.
He has avoided the radical approach, so he took a middle course, focusing on improving people's living standards. That's the key message of Deng Xiaoping.
On the 1st of January 1979, the USA recognized the People's Republic of China. And then in mid-January, Deng went to Washington to meet President Jimmy Carter and to begin a new age. Back home, the reforms began in the South, the historic dynamo of China's economy. And they would change China and the world. In the 40 years since, even the farmers in the famine lands of Anhui would open their own small businesses. Food on every plate now. While the cities of the South will become the world's biggest manufacturing base.
That one society that's that huge could change so rapidly, it's just staggering. It's just staggering, and none of us predicted it. In the 20th century, if you say, what leader did more to change the world than any other, I think you have to say Deng Xiaoping.